Alright, so welcome back. This is the second part of the um, lecture. So we have this condensed form. Now we need to add some more rules. This is condensed, okay, so the ambiguity has been removed to some extent. But we need to standardize things. Standardization means we need to add some rules so that everyone in the world who tries to read this understands. So we need to add some rules, so that's called standardization, to make things standard so that everyone can easily understand that. So let's discuss the rules. Alright, so we discussed that while writing an algorithm, we have three types of. Uh, the algorithm has three basic parts. One is the input instructions, the other is the process instructions or steps, the third is the output output related instructions, right? So in other words, we can also say that these are the three types of instructions or the categories of commands that we can give to an instruction. So any command that we give to the computer, either it would be related to input or process or output. These are the only three categories on of instructions that the computer understands, or the instructions that we can give to the computer. So So we need to define rules for each of these. So let's discuss the rules of condensed form, that is how to write the instructions in the condensed form for input. So the rules are the instructions or the steps for the of related to the input part must have two words only. So this is the rule. It should only have two words. And amongst those two words, the first word should be, let's say, input. Either it can be input and or read or enter, something like that. So, all right, so this is the first rule, that the first word should be input. Just to make things more easier and simpler, let's stick to any one of these words. The most appropriate word is input. I'll just add this in brackets so that we know the synonyms for input, which are read or enter, something like that. The second word should be a variable. And variable we've already discussed. It's simply a box which can contain some value, which can hold some value. It's a container, it's a box which can hold some value for us. So the second word should be a variable. So these are the two rules. So let's now apply this rule to this step number one, this first instruction, first input statement of our condensed form for the problem that we discussed, which was find the sum of two numbers. So let's apply these rules on this first step, which is take two numbers. So the first word should be, we have fixed this can be take as well. Let's say read, enter. Take can also be considered as a synonym, but the first word should be input. So let's replace this with input. So now it's something like this. But since the rule said it should be two words, now we have three words: input, two numbers. So it says that the second number should be a variable. So, sorry, second word should be a variable. So what we know already about variables, we have already done this in Scratch. That variable is a box which can only hold a value of any one particular thing at a time. So, but here we have two different numbers. So in fact, we need two different variables. So now we need to split this step into two steps. So basically now we need to split this into two parts. The first step would be, let's say, input uh, first number, and the second step would be input the second number. All right, so we need to split that step into two. Oops, but the problem isn't still solved. Let's rename these steps since we have now introduced a step. So this can happen, doesn't matter. One step in basic idea, we can have multiple steps. We can convert this into multiple steps also. Sometimes it happens that two or more steps are combined into a single step in the condensed form. So either one step can be broken down into multiple steps when we go from basic idea to condensed form, or the other way around can also happen. We can have two or more steps which can be merged or combined into a single step. So both are fine. So in this case, our step 1 has been broken down into these uh, these two steps: input first number and second number. But let's look at this rule again. It's still not two words. It has three words: input first number and second number. So let's say if we have a variable, let me just to visualize. Let me open a whiteboard of sorts. For example, if you have a box, this variable, and the name of this variable is first number. All right. So the problem is, and we have another variable whose name is second number. All right. So according to the rule, now the problem is only about the name. So how can we? The question is, how can we basically do something with the name? Because eventually this is just a name, first number, second number, it's just a name. So how can we actually fix this name so that how can we do something with these two words so that they become one single word? So in programming terms, so there's a space in between, so we need to fix that space basically. So we have a space here. So one of the techniques to solve this is adding an underscore. So in programming, underscore is a very common special character that we use generally in naming in specifying names of functions or variables. So this is one of the solutions. Instead of spaces, just add underscore and replace the spaces with underscore. So now our problem is fixed. Now one word, and this is a single word because there are no spaces. Words are basically separated by spaces. So now we don't have spaces, so now these are two words. Input first number, second number. This is one way of naming variables. There's another technique. For example, let me just undo this. For example, if this was these two words, we need to make a valid variable name. So another thing is remove the space and change the case of the second number to uppercase. The reason that we're changing is because if we don't have, since we have removed the spaces, so now it becomes, as a human being, it becomes difficult for us to read where the second word starts and so on. So that's why we say the first word should always be in small case or lower case, small letters, but every following word must start with a capital. So first number, so we'll capitalize N. Note that there are no spaces. So in this notation, there are no spaces. But every following word, every new word is capitalized. So again, we remove the space and we'll capitalize the second word. So this becomes first number and second number. This notation of naming is called camel case. And you might guess that why is it called a camel case? Because camels have humps. And this is just like a hump. Let me draw this. This will become easier. For example, now we have these variable names as first number and second number. All right, so these are now the variable names according to the camel case notation. Let me just center line them. So where does the hump, why is this notation called camel case? So let's observe this and let's see. What happens is camels have humps. So this first number, the second number is capitalized. So this is just like a hump of the camel. Similarly, so this N. So each capitalized letter is basically denotes a hump. So that's why this is called camel case. Camel case. Alright, so this is known as the camel case notation. So these are the naming rules, variable naming rules. There are a couple of more rules as well. We'll discuss that those rules later in class. So, all right. So these were the this was about keeping this was about the rules of variable names. All right, so that's done. So these were the these are the only rules. Two words in first word which should be input, second should be a variable, and the variable names should be meaningful. This is a meaningful name. By reading this, I can easily figure out that this is a number and this is the first number that the user will input. For example, this can also be a name. Recall algebra variable names. We write x, y, z, a, b, c. So these are also valid variable names, but it's not a good programming practice, as we say GPP. So it's not a good programming practice. It's not a GPP. So the other way around was better. So this is better than having a name A or B or whatever. So this is a GPP that you should follow this guideline, that you should have meaningful variable names. All right, step 1, 2 are done. So now we need to convert step 3 and 4 and standardize these two. So input rules. All right, next let's see what are the rules for the process statements. This is step 3 was the process statement or instruction or step. So let's see what are the rules for the process part. So the rules for the process part are, it should be mathematical expressions. They should be mathematical expressions, algebra-like expressions. For example, in order to add two numbers, how will you express this in algebra? So you might write something like this: a plus b equals to c, or x plus y equals to z. So these are the mathematical expressions that we write in algebra. So exactly similar to algebra, we write these expressions. The only difference is, obviously, the only difference is that this equals to sign comes on the left hand side. So let me just copy paste so that you can compare it. So this a plus b is fine, just as you write in algebra, but the result comes on the left hand side. So this equals to come on the left hand side and the result comes on the left hand side. So basically the values will be calculated on the right hand side. You look at the right hand side first, and then that value is sent to the left hand side. So things go right to left in computer science and algorithms and programming. So this is in algebra, and this is in CS and algorithm and programming. All right. So this is so we'll write such expressions. So in this case, let's solve this. Let's solve step 3. All right. So in step 3, we need to write something like this: C equals to A plus B. So we'll replace this, add two numbers. So let me use this expression for, and let's see what changes do we need to make here. So C equals to A plus B. This means that A and B are two variables, and we need to add these two numbers, these two variables, values of these variables, and then we need to store this sum into a third variable. All right. So the only change that we need to make is, obviously we have already named our variables that we'll use. The variables are first number and second number. So instead of A and B, we'll have obviously first number and second number. And C is not a meaningful variable name, so we'll keep a meaningful name. Let's call them simply sum. So this is our new variable that we have introduced. So it's not necessary that you always introduce a variable with input. You can introduce any variable with like in any new step. So that's all. That's it. Process statements will contain these such statements. All right, now let's discuss the rules for the output step. The output statements or steps in the condensed form have the same rule, very similar to the input. That's why I'll just copy paste. Output statements must also have two words only. And these two words, just the difference is, instead of output, you'll use input, instead of input, you'll write output. Instead of read, you can use, these are the synonyms now, either write, or or display, or show, take it something like that. Some other synonyms for input is get and put. All right, but the most common is this: input and output, or the next common ones are read and write. So try to stick to these two words only. The best thing would be just stick to this input. It's quite meaningful enough. The second would be a variable. So let's see whether this, let's apply this to this step. display result. All right, we have two words, but what is the problem? The only problem is that this should be a variable, but we don't have any variable yet called sum, because these are the only variables we have created, and we have created another variable and we have called that, sorry, and we have called that, sum. All right, so we have a variable called sum. So we don't have any variable called result. So we'll simply change this to sum, because we need to show the user what the result was. So this step will look like this. That's it. This is the condensed form ready for you. And next step, we'll see what should be the next step. So that's all about the condensed form. So now you're all set to do the HLA, which was the first 20 problems for handout 0. So best of luck. If you have any questions, drop your message on Google Hangout or email, and see you in class. Thank you.